Hey everybody, welcome back. Thought I would do another Ask Me Anything episode since a number of you, either in the comments or in our community page, have chimed in with some questions that seem to come up a lot the more and more we create videos and the more time we spend together. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to do another one of those Ask Me Anything episodes. And I've selected a few questions that have been submitted. I apologize if your question is not on this list, but I'm trying to make an informative video that isn't, 3 or 4 hours long. But these are the ones that I felt kind of cover a lot of the same bases or common questions that I get either, like I said, in the comments or on the community page or elsewhere in social media. So without further ado, I guess, ask me anything. Here we go. Mark writes, what do you have hiding under the turntable? And this is actually a new question because I'm assuming it has to do with the turntable stack behind me, which is a Technics 1500C turntable, which is kind of an, I guess, audiophile friendly or less DJ-y 1200, which is what put Technics on the map. But below it is their matching integrated stereo amplifier and super audio CD, and media streamer, which we will be talking about on this channel in due time. But that is actually what is underneath the turntable, Mark. This is a question from Thomas. Thomas writes, how does somebody who doesn't necessarily have the funds for getting into the hobby of interior design take part in it? I can approach this one of two ways. Why this question made this video is I saw interior design and I got really excited because that's something that I really enjoy. So I don't know if, Thomas, you meant to write interior design or you meant to write home theater, but I'm going to answer it from both perspectives. Starting with home theater, how does one get into home theater or stereo or audiophile hi-fi playback when you don't have a lot of money? And I argue that it's easier now than ever because you can literally build a decent enough stereo 2-channel rig to enjoy music and movies with well under a $500 price point. And because of this, it is now is a great time. Like, you don't, as long as you don't have insane expectations, like you want to be able to enjoy 20-point surround sound, or you want to be able to have 8K, or as long as you keep things within perspective, you can do a lot with very, very little. And so I'm going to assume that you own a television. Well, if you own a television and that television is relatively new, chances are it has everything you need to stream content, both music and movies, likely already built in. Because most televisions, at least those bought within the last 2 or 3 years, are smart TVs, which have a semblance of some type of app-based, you name it, inside, in which case you don't need a source component anymore. You can hook your TV directly up to, say, a soundbar. And there are some really great sounding soundbars at the $100, $200, and even $300 level. But if you want discrete stereo sound, it is still even possible to get 2 powered loudspeakers like the Kanto Audio YU4s, or YU2s even. I would argue probably the YU4s because they give you a little bit more expandability down the road as funds permit. But you can get something like YU4s, I think, for $300, maybe less than that. I haven't checked the price. And hook those directly to a TV and stream movies and music through a TV, through those speakers, at a turntable later. You don't need a receiver, you don't need anything, extra phono stage, you don't even need DACs, because these types of speakers have that stuff built in. And if you have a smartphone, you can even Bluetooth your favorite audio via whatever streaming music account you have to speakers like the YU4 directly. And that's just a really great cost-effective way to get into the hobby without having to lose your shirt. And for a lot of people, that's arguably all they're ever going to need. And that makes it even more compelling because, for years, a lot of people would say that you need to spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And now you really to just get into it, to enjoy yourself, to have fun and experiment, we're talking about only having to spend a couple $100s. Now, if your question, Thomas, was in fact about interior design, my biggest recommendation about that is really pay attention to things like paints. Paint is relatively cheap. Paint is the easiest way to update any space. Secondhand, Goodwill, things like that are other great options. And believe it or not, I have found some really cool stuff, literally, that people are just giving away that, again, going back to paint, spray paint and whatnot, can dress up quite nicely. But for me, interior design is all about simplicity, symmetry, and having fewer pieces, but the right pieces. And when I say pieces, I mean furniture. In my opinion, a room looks better when it has absolutely the right piece of furniture, not necessarily pieces, but spend your money wisely and get the things that are going to last you a long, long while, versus worrying about trying to deck out an entire space all in one go. Because like I said, minimalism is an aesthetic, and carefully choosing your pieces, you're going to go from minimalist to contemporary, modern, whatever that is, as budget and funds permit. But start simply, make smart decisions, color is your friend, and never underestimate the power of paint. And don't underestimate the power of Home Depot and doing it yourself. And Joann Fabrics, that's another really awesome place to go, where you can really, really do a lot as it pertains to even going back to home theater. You can dress up and make a theater space very simply using some 2x4s, 1x2s, pressure fitting them, wrapping them in fabric. I mean, just use your imagination, but don't think that you have to buy everything like off the rack or pre-made. You can DIY, to quote the movie Martian, you can science or DIY the shit out of it and save a lot of money. Nathan Ball and kind of I'm gonna mess this name up. Nathan Ball and Vinyl Film Aholic 924 kind of had a similar question. So this is what Nathan wrote. How do you feel about playing back 2-channel music through surround up converts like ProLogic II and its variants? Have you used them much? Do they enhance the immersion or realism of listening to music, or are they a gimmick, a cheat, and an affront to artistic integrity? I get this a lot because a lot of you have been fans of this channel when it talked about or had the show The Home Theater Experience, which obviously was all about more speakers, more this, more that. And so now that some of you who have come back to this channel or were original subscribers who have been watching this channel see that I am focused largely on 2-channel entertainment, I get this question a lot. And to be honest with you, I don't see an affront to the artist's intention when it comes to stereo and up converting it, because every movie at some level also has a stereo mix. So while they also may mix for Atmos and however many channels a theater can potentially possess, they understand that they also have to do a stereo mix, or they have to down mix, whatever that is, to stereo. So you can go from multi-channel to stereo and stereo matrixed to faux surround sound. To me, it's not a big deal. It's not an affront. It's not bad. For many, many years and older content that you may have, matrixing it to surround sound is going to be your only option. If you have a film or a title, whether it's even on DVD, maybe even Blu-ray, or you're hanging on to some old VHS even, stereo's all you got. Stereo's all that film may have had, and in some instances, classics are even only in mono, in which case your matrix, you're going to use processing just to make it stereo. And as for listening to music, and if you listen to music also in your home theater space with multiple speakers, I don't have a problem with that. In fact, a really good friend of mine, Ray, he listens to music obviously in his dedicated theater space, and he joked about it way back in the day, is why should I worry about center imaging when I have a center channel? And it's a good point, and it's a really good point. And if And if you have a dual purpose kind of theater space that you also like to listen to music more critically in, might as well use your center. I mean, might as well. You spent the money on it, and might as well get that 360 degree, surround sound stage, if you will, because, well, if you've got the speakers, use them. But on the flip side, do you have to have 5, 7 or more speakers to enjoy a movie in home? Do you have to have 5, 7, 9 or more speakers to have a home theater? No, you don't. You don't, because when I worked in movie theaters and I was a projectionist and was in charge of the audio and all of that, and I get it, this is going on, 20 plus years now, but we only had one theater at that time that had actual true surround sound. The rest of our theaters were stereo, and no one ever complained. I was never not immersive enough or big enough. And I mean, we were showing, blockbuster movies like Titanic and Star Wars and things like that. And so it's all about how you set it up. And honestly, I would rather have a really, really good pair of stereo speakers set up properly and watch all my movies that way, as well as listen to music, than shoehorn multiple speakers into a space that really can only accommodate maybe 5 or 3 and have it all kind of be a mishmash hodgepodge. And so I'm a firm believer in get the basics right and enjoy yourself, and then add from there. So I hope that answers your question on that one. Philippia Sec. I'm really bad with some of these screen names, guys. I know who you are. I recognize you from the comments. Will you get back to surround sound? Don't you think you missed some of the vision of the creator using only stereo? This kind of gets back to the previous question. Do I think I'll get back to surround sound? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure at some point a demo will demand it, a product will demand it, in which case, yes, I will break out multiple speakers, hook up a temporary surround sound, and demo it and talk about it. As for me, for my daily driver, my daily driving, I don't require it. I really don't. And I've spent 20 plus years in that space of more channels, discrete this and separate components and so on and so forth. I've been there, I've done it, I've built it, I've owned it. And honestly, to be perfectly frank, the statistics of who among us are actually at that level or actually partaking in that seriousness of surround sound is very, very small. In a recent survey that I was privy to the results of, and this survey of over, I want to say close to 100,000 people that consider themselves dedicated enthusiasts in the home theater and audiophile hobbies, less than 12% of those polled had 7.1. In fact, I think it was 20% had 5.1. The rest were stereo. And these are people that read home theater publications. These are people that have subscriptions to home theater publications. And as for Atmos, it was less than 1%. And some of the other feedback that I was able to read from that survey, and I think the survey might be about a year old at this point, so I don't want to say that it's the end-all be-all, but some of the other information that I gleaned from that is just how little people understand about this hobby. And so my view of it is, before I throw more at you, I want to make sure that you understand that it's possible to enjoy yourself from a standpoint of a 2-channel or 2.1 or maybe 3.1 type setup. And I want to talk about products that are not only obtainable, as well as high-end. Obviously, the Formation Duos and the JBL L100s are not entry-level products, but I do want to make sure that we talk about things that people can readily go out, get their hands on, plug in easily, not have to fuss a lot with, and that enhance their everyday lives. And I think that that's possible to do with a very, very nice display, a large display, streaming speakers, your digital Tidal, Spotify type music services, record players, integrated amps, things of that nature. And And I really do think that that's, aside from soundbars, that's how this is going to grow. If surround sound grows or goes through a resurgence, it's not going to involve dozens of channels of amplification or speakers or things of that nature. It's going to be like 5.1, 5.2, if we're lucky. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Garrett Carroll, as a music listener and not an instrumentalist, how do you think about music from that standpoint? I want to say that I interpreted this question maybe differently, but here goes. I saw this as a musician, how do I view AV stuff and vice versa? Or how do I view listening or stereo listening, audiophile, hobby, home theater as a musician versus someone that is just a listener and not a musician, which is something that has always fascinated me because I do play instruments and I have played multiple instruments throughout my life. And I have to tell you, of all the musicians that I know and of all the musicians that I've been privy to interview and talk to and get to know, they do not have setups like what audiophiles have. It's actually pretty rare. And it's not that they don't value audiophile setups, it's just, it's not what they use to make their music, so it's not always what they use to listen to it back. And so I have had an opinion about that for many, many years that kind of comes from a point of, you know, not many musicians are using $100,000 loudspeakers or even $30,000 or $40,000 loudspeakers to make the very music audiophiles spend tens of thousands of dollars trying to recreate. And so if we want to talk about artist's intent, then one would argue that if you want to hear what they're hearing, you should use what they're using, which in some instances can be a pair of Yamaha NS10s, which you can go down to Guitar Center and get for $150. Now, a lot of people out there will say, well, they have to use Yamaha because those are the greatest facsimile or summation of crap speakers. So if it sounds good on Yamaha speakers, powered monitors, then it's going to sound good anywhere. Okay, well, yeah, they may mix to the lowest common denominator and it gets better from there. But I've been in a lot of music studios. I have like some really world-class, very famous ones. And I've seen Genelec. I've seen a lot of JBL. But I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen something more esoteric than that. I've never walked into a studio and seen Wilson Maxes or Dyne Audio. I've seen Focal and a few others, but yeah, I do think that there is a little bit of a disconnect between the hobby and the people that create the content the hobby is supposedly obsessed with, which also leads me to think that this hobby isn't really even about sound, it's about the gear. And people really, really love the gear more than they love the content because, again, if we really were talking about content then and wanting to know and hear what the artists intended, then we would pay a lot more attention to the tools and methods that they use in order to make that content, i.e. audiophiles wouldn't think powered speakers were evil. And we may not necessarily have uber high-end stuff. So. But aside from that, as someone who has played piano for a number of years or played saxophone and things of that nature, I'm super aware of how real instruments sound compared to reproduced and how many times I've sat in demos with other people who will go on to write or say, like, that's the most realistic portrayal of a piano I've ever heard through a pair of speakers. And I'm like, have you ever heard a piano? Because that's not what they sound like at all. And you would only know that by spending a lot of time behind the keyboard of a piano, learning your craft. And so I think that maybe that makes musicians a little bit more in the know. I'm not claiming to be a musician more in the know, but maybe that would make someone Like, for instance, like a Diana Krall or a Billy Joel, who maybe, and I don't know what kind of systems these people have, but maybe they don't have super nice systems, and maybe that should tell you something. I don't know. But that is how I interpreted that question. Let's see. FOMO on Tech. I think this is another YouTuber. What speaker price above which doubling the budget brings no improvement, just different? So, i.e., at what point, I guess, is the law of diminishing returns? Like, if I have a $500 loudspeaker, how much more do I realistically have to spend in order to do better than that? Well, that is the question, isn't it? Honestly, I don't know, because I can tell you that just off the top of my head, like a pair of JBL 3 series powered monitors are exceptionally good at around $250, $300 a pair, as are YU6s. Now, is that to say that there's no steps in between a $300 pair of loudspeakers like the JBL 3 series and Kanto Audio YU6s before you get to, like, say, JBL L100s, and there's nothing in between? Well, obviously not. Our $2,000 Buchard S400 infinitely better than, say, an ELAC? I don't know, because sound is not only subjective to your personal tastes, but it's also very room dependent. And what I can describe in a room, you can then bring into your house wherever you choose to listen to music and hear something completely different. And as a result, you may not equate that either to the speaker or your environment. You may equate that to me saying that, hey, you're full of crap, you led me astray, blah, 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 when in fact I didn't. It's just we are trying to distill down so many variables to get to the meat and potatoes of something that it becomes very generalized. And you have to understand that about reviews, is you are watching someone's generalized opinion of something based on their parameters and based on their biases. And you can choose to side with their biases, but understand that that is exactly what you are doing. You are choosing to align yourself with their way of thinking, or what they like, and so on and so forth. And if you don't do your homework and you don't go out there and hear for yourself and make up your own mind, then either A, you're bound to be disappointed at some point in your journey, or B, you're going to be really torn because everything you hear about is somehow magnificent and you're not going to know what to buy. And as for getting back to the question, like, at what point do you have to spend more? You know, I don't know. Like, for example, I do think like the U-Turn Audio Orbit Plus, that is my that has been my reference turntable for the last 6 or 7 months at around $300. I think it's fantastic, and I happen to think that it is 90% of all of the high-end turntables under, say, $5,000 that you are going to need. And for a lot of people, the thought of spending $5,000, the thought of spending $2,000 on a turntable is simply out of the question. It's not about savings. It's not about working harder. It's just something they're not going to want to do. And so $300 is a lot of money, in which case I would get that, be content with it, buy all the records you can afford, and enjoy your life. That being said, this new Technics 1500C behind me at, what is that, I think $1,200. Is it a better turntable than the U-Turn? Without question. Without question. And it's noticeably better. Noticeably better. Does that make the U-Turn bad? No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. But again, for a lot of people, $1,000, $1,200 turntable is simply not an option. So you need to be honest with yourself whenever you go to make a purchasing decision. Truly understand this about yourself, and understand what type of hobbyist, what type of listener, what type of enthusiast are you going to be. If this is going to be a casual thing, or maybe you're going to spend a total of 2 or 3 hours a week, or maybe even a month, really sitting down and investing your time in your investment, then I would cap your spending for your whole system at like a couple $100, maybe $1,000 tops. Because you're never going to get that return of enjoyment back out of it if you continue to spend more and more and more and more on something you don't use. But if you're the type of person that works really hard 9 to 5 and you come home, kick your feet up, grab a glass of wine, a beer, what have you, and you know that for 2 hours a day, every day or majority of the days, you can be expected to be listening to something, well then this is an environment, this is a tool that you're going to use and you're going to get a lot of mileage out of, in which case maybe you should invest. So that's the question I think needs asking more than how much should I spend before I expect to see results. I think you really need to be honest with yourself about budget and what type of listener, viewer, etc. you are, and then go from there. Fish 1221 writes, advantages, disadvantages of two-way, three-way speakers for home theater. I'm a less is more person, honestly, but that being said, I currently have some fantastic three-way speakers in the JBL L100s, so saying less is more is potentially going to be hypocritical. I do think that there's better coherence with a simple two-way monitor, but I understand that three-way speakers may possess deeper bass, more rich bass, and for some people it saves them having to buy a subwoofer and therefore saves them money, saves them space. But I think everything is pretty much remarkable now in the terms of like we've largely figured out speakers. Sorry to say, I don't think that there's any like truly magic elixir coming down the pike other than using DSP and powered speakers and beam steering and things like that, in which case it's not about two-way or three-way. You can have 26-way speakers and do some really, really crazy stuff. But as far as traditional speakers are concerned, you know, the two-way bookshelf versus, say, a three-way floor stander or a three-way monitor, I don't think it matters. Buy what sounds good to you, buy what you can afford, buy what's going to work in your room with your tastes, and move on. Greg 70987 writes, subwoofers? Yes, subwoofers indeed. I think they're cool. I think they are hugely misunderstood. I think a lot of people, because of the internet and because of social media and because of sharing of photos and whatnot, think that more is more with subwoofers, and I actually think that a lot of people would be better off having fewer. Having one, yes, but having fewer. I see so many photos and systems of, you know, people that have like 2, 4, 6, 8 subwoofers, and I'm just sitting there going, okay, if you set each and every one of them up perfectly and did your homework and you know what you're doing, that is probably the most smooth bass response you likely are ever going to hear. But I have been in enough rooms where people have gone subwoofer mad, and I can't tell you how much of their mid-range they're sucking out of their experience because the bass is just drowning it out, or worse, they're sucking their own bass out of their performance because the subs themselves are eating each other's sound waves, which is actually a thing. They're creating nulls in their room instead of peaks, and they're not having a flat response at all. So I think subwoofers are important, and I think they're important in the 2-channel arena, just as equally important in home theater, or I should say they're just as equally important in 2-channel circles as they are in home theater, but they are largely misunderstood, and that's a real shame. And I would rather have a 8-inch subwoofer with maybe like 150 watts placed just perfectly in a room and set up just right before I would even consider buying 2 subwoofers or one of those 1,000 watt or 2,000 watt powered subs. Not that those can't be great, they are. I've had my share of them, but again, getting back to basics, it's better to have something modest set up properly so that you know what you're doing, you hear what you're getting, and then you know how to build from there, than to go hog wild from the starting point and then not know if you've actually done more harm than good. So, A Person, that's an awesome screen name, by the way. A Person writes, why don't you review amplifiers? I do review amplifiers, and then I'm about to review another amplifier. I don't think I review amplifiers as often as maybe some people would like, purely because they're boring. There's not a lot to talk about. But that's largely why I don't review amplifiers. They're big, they're heavy. A lot of stuff that I want to talk about, I don't see people buying amplifiers. I see people simplifying their systems and not wanting multiple boxes. And so as a result, it becomes increasingly more difficult to justify. And that's not to say that I won't review amplifiers. It's just that, again, if it's possible to have an integrated amplifier, an all-in-one box solution that performs the same or eerily similar to someone that has dual mono blocks with a preamp, I'm going to go for the integrated, because personally, I don't want 3 boxes. I don't want all those cables. And if I can do it with one and simply, I think that's going to have more appeal to people that might be looking to upgrade their audio quality of life. So, but there'll be some amplifiers. There will be. It's just, it's a section or a genre inside of this hobby that I think is dwindling, not growing. Final question, Mike Ochoa, hope I said that right. I do hope I say that right, Mike, because your question is, I think, the most important question of the day, especially given what's transpired in the real world over the last couple of days. Mike writes, why do people become so tribal in AV gear or music tastes? And I think that that's a great question to end on, and I think that that is the question, because I have to admit, when I got into this business over 20 years ago, and when I say business, I mean the business of reviewing products and evaluating products professionally, I do not recall the tribal nature being there. I recall people having favorites, like, oh, I really like, Macintosh, or I really like, Bowers and Wilkins. But I don't recall literally people looking at a Macintosh owner and being like, you're an effing idiot, or worse. I definitely, in all of my years of having a comment section or a letter section in a magazine or an online publication, I've never gotten death threats over AV equipment until recently. And that's scary. And I think that it's about just our current state of affairs. And I think that it's easier, given the anonymity of the internet, of social media, of all of these things that make it easy for someone to pile on. And no longer is it about what you yourself enjoy. You have to be, I think, part of a larger whole that's right. And so I think to really distill it down, if I'm honest, based on the analytic data of what I get from this channel, of what YouTube shares with me about you guys watching this, it would appear that the vast majority of people that watch this channel, whether they subscribe or they don't, actually the vast majority of people that watch this channel are not subscribers. But they are not watching to do research on something they haven't bought. They're watching, looking for justification or fuel in a decision they've already made. And when you look at this type of content through that lens, it becomes very easy to understand how the tribal mentality thrives. Because if you're turning to strangers as a stranger yourself for validation, you're not looking to better your situation, you're looking to align yourself with a style or type of thinking. And the more people you feel are aligned with that way of thinking, the more comfortable and right you are likely going to start to feel. And anything that comes therefore and challenges that is going to appear like a threat. And that's where the tribal mentality comes from. So let's look at powered speakers as an example. For the better part of 50 years, the best way to stereo audiophile nirvana was preamp, amp, or mono blocks, a pair of really high-end speakers, record player, reel-to-reel, whatever. What I've just described is a stack of black boxes all doing very specific things into speakers, and this thought of, hey, yes, this does get expensive, but if you want it, you're going to pay it, and that's the only way to audio enlightenment, if you will. Now, in the last couple of years, not only has there been an economic downturn that has made the argument of spending six figures or more on AV equipment kind of asinine, but technology, things like DSP, things like streaming have made it possible for you to enjoy all of these things with less. And powered speakers have taken what was once a stack of gear and piled it all into a singular box or two boxes, or a speaker essentially. And guess what? They don't suck. They're not terrible. And in some instances, when people are able to listen to them objectively, meaning they can divorce their own personal biases from them, maybe having already spent a lot of money on something more traditional, they will admit to you that, oh my God, like this is amazing. And maybe they will buy that for a secondary system, or they'll buy powered speakers or a soundbar for something else in their house, only to realize that they are using that more than their dedicated system. Well, that knowledge puts people who have maybe spent 10 plus years promoting, saving, buying, doing whatever they want with these dedicated systems. That puts them in an uncomfortable position to not only see their point of view challenged, perhaps, if these people are not secure with their point of view, but just to see it challenged, but then to also feel like this hobby, this group, their club is going to diminish because it's all going to go over here to something that they don't understand, and change can be scary. And I think that also helps to fuel the tribal aspect of this hobby. And I think that that's what we're experiencing. And you put 2 scoops of anonymity on top of that the internet affords most people, and it's a powder keg. It's really a powder keg, and it gets to be a bit dicey. And there are definitely days where I look at it and I shake my head and I go, I don't want to be a part of this. Like I don't want to be a part of this, and I don't feel like I am, but just making content somehow, some way feels like I'm contributing to this, and therefore it makes me want to back away, because this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be an exploration of what it is that you like as an individual, not whether or not you agree with me. And the personal attacks weigh heavily on me, because I don't understand how my liking of product A can somehow result in me as an individual being bad or evil or stupid or worse, any more than I would ever levy that to you, the viewer, by saying like, oh, you don't agree with me, pound sand, or do this, do that. Like I just don't understand that. At the end of the day, you can always stop watching, or you can tune into someone else that you agree with. But I do think that is where that tribal mentality comes from. And then again, it's in photography, of which I am, a photographer and a videographer, and you wouldn't believe how many people. I'm shooting this right now on a Canon EOS RP, which is arguably the most hated camera on all of YouTube. I think it's freaking fantastic. But I'm confident, now that I've called out what I'm using, I am confident someone will say that I'm an idiot for using it, and that I should be using a Sony whatever the hell. And that's just the way that it is now. And I wish that it didn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. I don't know why anyone would care what I ultimately choose to want to enjoy. But nevertheless, again, I don't think it's about researching something they're going to buy. A lot of the viewers that aren't subscribers, that understand that what we're doing here is a community, entertainment, information, I think a lot of people share and comment based on whether or not I agree with them, or something that they've already decided that they're going to do. So that's it, everybody. That is our second Ask Me Anything, or AMA. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for your questions. I'm sorry if you asked a question that I did not include in this episode. Maybe I will answer it next time. But thank you all again for watching. Please do, if you liked this video, please do like and subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and share it with your friends so that we can grow this channel, grow this community, maybe put an end to some of this bickering and just have fun, and remember that this hobby is supposed to be all about fun. But yes, I do appreciate each and every one of you for watching. Thank you so much. And until next time, remember, the only person that has to enjoy and like your system is you. So happy listening, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye.